All right. Hey, welcome everyone. It's a live stream Tuesday. And today we are going to do, a Bitcoin special because guess what, folks? Yep, it's all right, I have this on my screen here. Let's see, what is the very most latest price here? All right. Yeah, well, it's 72,684. Okay, 72,684. So, well, uh, we don't want to gloat or anything, but I mean, hey, we're within what, like $1,000 of the high that was hit in March earlier this year. And I'm going to reiterate in today's live stream a number of things that I've been saying for the last several months. Some of these are things as as like the March high hit, and obviously I thought that that moment in time was going to rip higher, but like more research, more study of the cycles that we have available suggests that there is a very strong cyclical pattern to when Bitcoin prices rise, not just when, how they rise, and then we're going to look into the future and also anticipate the peak, because like that will give you some sense of like, okay, I mean, it's not going to just continuously go up, but we are definitely in a period right now where it's going to feel like that, and somewhere near the peak it will feel like it will just never go down, but that is all out into the future. Today let's deal with like, where are we, what's about to happen. And exciting times are coming. Exciting times are coming. And it is crazily enough almost sort of like pre-programmed into the Bitcoin. What's the right word? Ecosystem is wrong. The wrong word. The Bitcoin cycle. Yeah, I mean that's the right word. I mean, there is a very clear cycle, and I believe it's driven by the fact that we've never had a asset that is finite, like, I mean, actually finite, like where this is it, like you cannot create more. However high the price, you can't, pay the person, you can't bribe the issuing authority to make more, and we have never had that, at least in my mind, in human history. I suppose the only thing you can really sort of compare it to, I'm trying to get my computer because it feels like I was like slightly off. The only thing you can sort of compare it to is art, I suppose. But artists can make more paintings. Maybe you could compare it to like the biggest diamond, but even then, like the mining companies can go out there and dig up the earth and search and search, and odds are they probably could find something that's more. So we've never had one. So that's unique factor number one. Second unique factor is this halving. Like, I mean, that when when I first heard the halving, I have to admit I did not understand it. I didn't really get it. But having studied it now for like a few years, like I'm like, I can find nothing in human history where it is programmatically, coded to cut new supply in half on such a regular basis, irrespective of price, irrespective of conditions, irrespective of demand, irrespective of supply. It is just going to do it. It is just going to do it. And so, I mean, just think, I mean, we have asset prices of so many things where the supply just continuously keeps going up. Right. I mean, and as the price goes higher, the incentive to increase it just keeps going. And here we have this very highly valued asset backed by scarcity. People, the critics are still out there saying it's got no intrinsic value and this and that. That's all fine. It's still trading for, let me just check again. I mean, hey, I'm enjoying this, obviously. $72,556 per coin. So, I mean, we've never had something like that happen. And so we're still learning, like, how are human beings, how is human society going to respond to this? And we don't really know. Like, I mean, just imagine that in the next halving, right, which is going to be in 2028, we're going to go from 3.25 Bitcoin issued as a reward block down to half, 3.25, so 1.625. And then in 2032, we'll get, for the very first time, it'll be under 1 Bitcoin. So we're currently at 450 Bitcoin. I think it's per day. So then you go to 225, then you go to 62 and a half. Then it's going to be 31 and a half. I mean, it is going to get down to like nothing. What will be the price as this happens? Let's discuss. But before we do all that, legal disclaimer and disclosure, which is this live stream and the content from ATG Digital is not investment or financial advice. It's presented to you as opinion, information, engagement, and entertainment. Whatever you choose to do with it, it is your responsibility because it is your money. All ATG Digital content may contain errors, oversights, and mistakes. Understand that investment operations, which is what? Well, buying, selling, any investment, stock, option, crypto, etc., has significant risks and can lead to the loss of your principal. Loss of your principal is jargon for losing money. I, the owners, employees, contractors of ATG Digital, own, trade, transact the securities I mentioned in this video and all content from ATG Digital. Next, we do not take money from companies or from crypto sponsors, promoters, etc., to recommend their stocks or crypto tokens for better and for worse, for gain and for loss. Yeah, whatever you hear from me, whatever you read in our Substack, whatever is in the ATG Digital updates, portfolios, etc., is our independent and sole opinion. Unaffected by whatever these folks would like you to say. This is our sort of like free stuff that we put out. Obviously, I'm on YouTube, and there's the Substack and Ballman Speculating podcast, which I have not done one now for like over 6 weeks. I have content, but somehow I never seem to quite get to actually doing them. Very active on X, inactive on Instagram. Dean is quite active on Facebook. I saw a couple of posts today on Bitcoin, so I know folks are enjoying that. And if you want subscriptions for various tiers at tiers levels. The silver tier is our introductory or sort of like multi-cap and multi-crypto tier. It's got a little bit of everything, comparable to what Profits Unlimited was in a kind of way. Almost knocked my Rubik's Cube here. And then we have gold tier, which is sort of comparable to True Momentum and a few of the other things that we clumped into one. We couldn't have 7 or 8, services like we did at Banyan Hill. And we got platinum tier, which is our trading tier. As both options and crypto, we've been in the last 6 months, we've been mostly active on the option side because the crypto side has been quite, I don't know, subdued. But as Bitcoin makes new highs, I'm sure that will start to change. And then we have diamond tier and purple tier. Diamond tier is sort of like small cap, which is extreme fortunes, 100x, etc. And then purple tier, which is sort of like special reports, special focus, and things like that. All right. Getting back to, let me take this off. Getting back to Bitcoin. So I've got a couple of charts, and I've been putting this up on X mostly, showing them to our team over time, which is that we are in the golden period based on the halving cycles that we have experienced for Bitcoin already, which is 2012, 2016, 2020, and the most recent one is 2024. In April of 2024, some of you know that we did a live stream. And then, what happened after that? Well, Bitcoin prices actually had peaked prior to the halving. And that's interesting. I thought at the time that was like had never happened before. It actually has happened before. And in each time, there's like some reason why it kind of like it happened. In this case, well, the reason is the Bitcoin ETF. And it's very clear now in hindsight that clearly all the folks, BlackRock, Fidelity, everyone else that was anticipating the Bitcoin ETF being approved had to have been stacking up a lot of Bitcoin through their whatever units that would look to kind of like they could buy their Bitcoin from, because to launch a Bitcoin ETF and to have rocketed it, some big amount would never work. Obviously, the folks who are launching the Bitcoin ETF would have some sense that this is a limited price asset, limited supply asset, and you got to prep for it. Then we also had, and then into that rise, we then had the emergence, obviously, of a number of sellers. Now, the buying that came in all at once in the beginning was never likely to be sustained for without additional price increases continuously. And with Grayscale seeing redemptions because they chose to keep their fees at that ridiculously high level. I think it's 1.5%. So that was obviously going to drive liquidity. And as long as there is a seller, it's very hard to boost prices up. So we had a number of mix of things, and then there were a number of like big sellers, the German government, I can't remember. There are other folks. Then there was like the estates of FTX and Mount Gox. And so there were a lot of different issues, like, it's there. The truth is that in every cycle, though, despite whatever, it seems so unique to this cycle, somehow it is always, turned out nonetheless where the first new high, remember, and it's the first new high comes about 6 months after halving. So, you can see where we are today. You can see the yellow bar, that's the pre-halving high, which was a bit of a surprise. Normally, you wouldn't see that big rise, as big of a rise into the halving. So that's one reason why we have sort of like sat like, in this like range. In other halving cycles, the move to the new high looks like this rather than like this. And I think that's because like there was a big bid up into the Bitcoin ETF launch as some amount of inventory was accumulated. And that drove obviously that new high price that drew in sellers of various kinds. And so we've had a range, but that range has been at a fairly high level. That range has been for the better part of April, May, and June, and some part of July. That was higher than the high that we saw in 2021. It's only really in August that, we went below that level of like 69,000. And then we saw a low of about 49,200. So from the 73,400 to 49,200, that's the high to low. That's about 33%. While that's, seemed like a lot, the truth is that, some of the previous halvings, as it was rising, the back and forth was, you saw multiple corrections of 20, 30% as that happened. We've seen, it's been volatile, but like, by Bitcoin standards, truthfully, this is, a bit tame. But I'm putting this up because the cycles say at 6 months, somewhere in that 6 months, it's not precisely 6 months. It's not like, this thing is not like it's not possible, in my opinion, to calculate it so exactly. But somewhere around the 6 month mark, that halving supply shock seems to really hit. And I've gone back and looked at 2012, where the data is still somewhat sketchy, 2016, 2020, and we see it on a regular basis. Let me see if I scroll this. Where is my... You can see here the 2000. I'm not going to go through every halving, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I actually want to get to a different chart. I'm giving you guys all the chart stuff that I look at on a regular basis. Let's see, where am I going here? All right, that's where I'm going. So those are, at least on my charting, the three different halvings, and you can see each halving has its the 2012 halving is not here because I don't think too many people were really tracking it. And I would venture that at that point in time, very few people truly understood what it would mean, what it meant. And I mean, in the 2012 halving, we hit a high of like $1,100, which was probably the thing that really got a lot of people interested. I know I got really interested in that 2016 halving. So that dark blue line. I remember we had the team here from Banyan Hill visiting. I think it was in 2017, and I was like, Bitcoin, this is like, this is just a fad, gonna go away. And then it rockets up essentially every month, starting about April, right? I mean, right about here. Right about April or so, it just starts rocketing up by like $1,000 pretty much per month. I mean, it made your head spin, And then, I mean, it just kept going and it kept going when you just thought like, no, there's no way that this could be 5,000. Come on, that's got to be the peak. Then 6, then 7. And then in the last month, which was in December, it just doubles from 10 to almost 20,000 in an instant. Well, that got the world's attention. Definitely got my attention. And I was like, damn, that's crazy. So I spent most of 2018 sort of like trying to study money, monetary history, trying to really find reasons to confirm my then belief, which was this was a fad and was going to, fizzle out. And then I was reading a book. I don't know where it is. It's on Monte, and it had all the different forms of money through time, right? I mean, we had like large rocks, and then we had pebbles, and then we had beads, and then we obviously went to metals, and then we went to paper, and then I was like, oh wow, I see. It's just a shift. It's just a shift in the change in the form of money. That's all it is. And we've done this through time. And once that idea clicked, then fairly soon after, I was like, okay, I see. This is like digital gold. This is the store of value for the digital era. And then I started to buy some to hold seriously. Prior to that, I had bought some and I would use it for all kinds of, like, in hindsight, such stupid things. Like, I mean, to buy so many, what would be the equivalent of meme coins then, I suppose. All these silly things because nobody really understood what was going on. But today, I mean, this is a very different thing, right? I mean, we've got BlackRock, we've got Microstrategy. I mean, we've got what? I mean, how much is in the? Let's look here. How much is in the Bitcoin ETF? Yeah, I mean, look at this. We got $68 billion here in the Bitcoin ETF that was just launched this year. Yeah, this year. So we're in some, in people who want to dismiss Bitcoin and say, hey, there has no intrinsic value. I mean, and these are, very well respected people, Warren Buffett, etc. It's all fine, but hey, you got to change with the times, otherwise the times are going to leave you behind. And there's definitely a basis for the nature of money changing through time. So let's get back to really where we are, which is like we're on that last candle. So this chart is a monthly chart, right? because if you do it daily, most people will sit there and focus on such a small little segment, which is that, when do you check prices? When they're really up, when they're really down. I mean, this is human nature, right? Otherwise, we'll generally. So I try to try to reduce my emotional impulse. And the way to do that is to be like, okay, if I look at it on a monthly basis, then I get a high and a low. That sort of like allows me to think a little bit more like long term, a little bit more widely, and gives me a big picture. But everything that you can see, and let me get my other chart up here. There is one more chart that I intended. Okay, yeah, this is it. This is the chart I would say. There is a classic rhythmic pattern to what is going on, and it is no shock to me that we are seeing the 70s pop up, because what? When was the Bitcoin halving this year? April 19th. What day is it? October 29th. It is 6 months and 10 days, which means a new high is imminent. Now, in this cycle, it's not clear what the new high is. Like, to me, a new high is really, if you're following the previous Bitcoin halvings, it would be around 69,000. So like, we're already above it, right? We're already above it. So now we just have to, get past that 73,800. And then the other thing, which is a little bit more controversial, and there's a lot of debate online, there's a guy named Plan B who's on X. There's another guy named, I think, The Root. I put up one of his charts, also on X, and they both are using models. Plan B uses something called the stock to flow model, and yeah. Okay, let me see if I can show some of these things. Oh no, got an error. So here's the stock to flow model that was sort of like popularized by Plan B. And the stock to flow model, you can see, uses these essentially just the using modeling around very scarce assets where the supply can be sort of somewhat defined. Like, for example, the supply of gold can be defined because we know gold is hard to find, and its new supply increases by somewhere in the range of 2 to 3%. So the stock to flow model, you can see what its prediction is for now, and for where it says sort of like where the next sort of like peak will be, which is somewhere in the, I'm going to round it and say, 1.2, $1.3 million. And all of my sort of like studies and research, partly driven by, some of the things that stock to flow and others have sort of suggested, say the sort of like the same thing. I'm trying to find. I mean, this website is pretty cool. Bitbo. I'm trying to find the. There's a lot of different charts here, but I cannot seem to find, of course not, what I'm looking for. But the guy from The Root has this thing where, because of the characteristics of Bitcoin of being finite supply, new supply cut by 50% every 3 years, there's almost a rhythmic reaction to that supply cut relative to the thing in which we value Bitcoin. Now, vast majority of you, I know we have subscribers and viewers from Singapore, Taiwan, and a few other places. But the vast majority of us, and even for folks around the world, the vast majority of them, the dollar, the US dollar is the reserve currency pretty much for most of the world, and everything kind of translates to that. So a dollar, the dollar can be seen as the sort of like the relative comparator. I mean, while we're always valuing Bitcoin in dollars, you can obviously value it in euros, yen, Australian dollars, Swiss franc, in any currency that you want. Truthfully, you can also value it in houses. I have seen a very effective chart, looking at the cost of houses in Bitcoin using an average price. And in terms of, Bitcoin clearly keeps its value far better than a house. But bottom line to bringing all this up is that it's no shock that what is going on, in my judgment, in my opinion, because past patterns like this predict it. And what it's saying is that somewhere in the next, I'm going to say, being that we're rapidly, I think this weekend, what Bitcoin was 68, 69. I think most of the weekend it was fluttering, struggling to hold $67,000 as a price that buyers would pay. And then suddenly by Sunday night, it was 69, 70. Why? Well, Asian buying clearly would, those folks are their trading day comes in much earlier. They're bidding up and push it higher. And so a new high then is imminent could be tomorrow, could be next week, could be anytime. And then from there, it's going to be a series of new highs. Why? Well, here we have to go back to investor psychology and how human beings respond to price and scarcity. Very clear from lots of evidence, and very clear if we are willing to admit it ourselves, which is that as the price of something goes up, we feel FOMO, we feel regret, we feel envy, we obviously feel greed. And so the higher the price starts to run, all of those things is going to draw in a lot of buyers, right? Just as the supply, you can't, there's no new supply that's going to come in to meet that new demand, right? And so as the price gets higher, the demand becomes greater. The attention to the price gets even more. So price drives demand, demand drives price, and this will keep going and keep going. And I theorize that we will have $100,000 by year end. Why? Well, markets tend to sort of gravitate to those round numbers. Those tend to be psychological barriers. So we'll very quickly gravitate to 100,000. And if my understanding of human price, reaction is once we get past 100, all the books that I've read say once, even a stock gets to 100, so many more buyers come in that, the vast majority of times it's going to jump to 120, 130. So we get to 100, it'll probably go to 120, 130. And then kind of the demand, for that kind of fizzles out, and it'll most likely go back to something near 100. So this is going to be a roller coaster ride. So don't get attached to looking at your account, be like, oh my God, I lost my gains. I know many people Paul, tell us when to buy and sell. Look, if I was that good, and if I knew with I don't know, second to second position that I could do this, and I would, but it's not, some of it's probably going to be when you're sleeping. Some of it's going to, happens there. So, I don't trade my Bitcoin. And I haven't really, the vast majority of whatever I own in Bitcoin, I've held now for 5 years, something like that, 5, 6 years. I mean, I have bought like some more, since I originally bought it, but and I've bought Microstrategy and other exposures, but it is going to be volatile. And I showed you the stock to flow chart, which projects, estimates, forecasts a peak, not like the ultimate, not like it's going to be there and keep going, of somewhere near $1 million. And one of the things you can see very clearly, even from this chart, is that, like, look at the peak. I don't have the 2012 peak, but you can, the 2012 peak, I'll speak to it. Bitcoin gets to $1,100, and then the low is 130 in that cycle. Yeah. 130, 1,100 to 130, right? 2016, right? I mean, we get a peak of 19,800. So let's round it to 20,000, and like the low post peak 3,000. Then we go from 3,000 to, let's call it 69,000, and then the low is 17. So there is a clear peak, and then there's some reaction to that very high price. Why does the reaction happen? Well, I have to theorize that at every price, eventually, I mean, even for Bitcoin, even for something that is finite, even for something where the new supply is this limited, people want to sell. There is obviously a huge market for certainty, and at least in terms of spending money, like I can't really, I mean, the only way to pay my mortgage with Bitcoin is I got to sell some Bitcoin, turn it into US dollars, and then pay my lender, right? I mean, if I want to buy a car, if I want whatever, we still have to convert. And so for that, you got to have fiat. So, I mean, I don't think the dollar is going anywhere. I think the dollar is going to continue as the primary medium of exchange, certainly in the United States, most likely around the world. So there's a demand for that, for exchanging. And let's say I'm right. Let's say stock to flow model, in the peak is, the date, by the way, for the peak is somewhere around between, like, I'll say end of October to like early December, right? I mean, that's the peak. At 1,200,000, assuming it gets there, you're not going to sell some? You know what? I mean, I'm going to sell some exposure. Maybe it's some of my MicroStrategy. Maybe, maybe some of them, a minor or something like that, for sure. I mean, why? Well, I mean, because it's nice to have cash around. But if you have enough people doing that, that brings sell pressure. So at a certain price, you're definitely going to see the same thing that happened in the 2016, 2012, 16, 2020, having happened again, which is sellers will come, overwhelm the market, and will push it down. And then, I'm sure we'll have whatever scandals du jour that are associated with high prices. Because, I mean, what is going to happen as Bitcoin just rockets higher? People are going to lever up. They're going to borrow against their house. They're going to borrow money, and they're going to go all in. Why? Because at high prices, we're always certain that this is a sure thing. This is guaranteed. Nothing can ever. So that's all coming ahead in the next essentially 12 months. All right. I mean, and imagine the demand for Bitcoin once it passes like some big psychological barriers. I mean, the first one is obviously 100,000. Once it crosses 100,000, yeah, I mean, there's some serious buying that is going to get going. I mean, every person that didn't buy the Bitcoin ETF when, Bitcoin was whatever. I mean, when they introduced it at, I mean, so it was probably what, 35,000, right? So it's effectively doubled. Now it's effectively tripled. Their clients are going to be like, you told me that Bitcoin was a waste of time. You told me this, you told me that. Some number of people get fired, and you can bet that they're going to move to somebody that did put their money into Bitcoin. So you'll start to have money sort of organized to get into it. And at every 100K marker, I mean, or at 250K, 500,000, 600,000. As these markers are hit, you are going to see an extraordinary sort of like coalescing of like people who have like this extraordinary desire to own this incredible asset that just keeps rising and rising and rising. And most people are not going to I mean, they're not subscribers to ATG Digital, so they're not going to have the view that this is a cycle. I think this kind of viewpoint of about Bitcoin, while it's there on social media, you have to find it. I think the vast majority of people view Bitcoin like any other asset. They're like the news of this, the news about inflation, the news, and some of that matters, on the margin, but the Bitcoin cycle rules supreme. Yeah, that's, this cycle in some way, shape, or form will continue. We won't know the exact shape until after it's done, but it will continue because it's based on the mathematical algorithmic properties of Bitcoin. All right. Before I move to questions and comments, what about MicroStrategy? Right? I mean, MicroStrategy stock is, I think, in our gold tier. I looked it up. I think it's up. Let me see. Um, MicroStrategy stock. Yeah, 1,451%. We put MicroStrategy into then True Momentum at $16.91. It's obviously split since then on October 20th of 2020. What about MicroStrategy? Well, I mean, they've got the biggest lead in collecting the largest amount of Bitcoin. As a company, obviously people say, well, BlackRock, Paul. I mean, well, yeah, but BlackRock's ETF is held for other people, right? I mean, it's not BlackRock's property. They're just custodying it for other people. So MicroStrategy is in the lead, and someone else is definitely going to copy them. I mean, at ATG Digital, we've put our reserves into the Bitcoin ETF ourselves. I mean, we don't have the scale of a MicroStrategy, but other people are going to start to do this, right? I mean, as you can see, like MicroStrategy has outperformed Bitcoin, and it will, in all likelihood, outperform Bitcoin on the way up, and it will also outperform Bitcoin on the way down. Yeah, this is going to be a double-edged sword. The upside volatility will also be balanced off by greater downside volatility. There's no question about it. Why? Well, because they use leverage. And I can tell you on the downside, however secure all the arrangements are, people will worry that MicroStrategy is going to go bankrupt. People will worry that they're going to have to sell their Bitcoin. So, I mean, MicroStrategy is going to do better than Bitcoin. So, I mean, and people say, well, can I buy it now? Well, I mean, obviously the chart looks like this. I mean, let's just put up a chart of MicroStrategy. It makes for a very, for me, I'll say entertaining viewing, because nobody could ever imagine this company having, I mean, it is now I'm seem to be struggling here with, yeah, it's now a $48 billion company. And I think it's up how much this year? This is my one year performance. It's up 544%. It's not switching charts oh yeah. All right, there we go. Up 544% this year. Yeah, I mean that's a lot better than Bitcoin. So you're going to do better here, and that will continue probably until sometime. I'm going to say that based on following similar-ish trades, that MicroStrategy will peak out probably, yeah, I mean, my best guess is probably a little bit before Bitcoin. And we won't notice it because it's outperforming. And so as long as it's doing well, but that level of outperformance relative to Bitcoin will start to fade. And that will be a signal that, like, well, if MicroStrategy is drawing sellers, then Bitcoin will start to draw sellers somewhere in the next, whatever, 1 month, 2 month, 3 months. All right. So MicroStrategy. What about miners? I haven't talked a lot about miners. And let's where's my list? Miners, crypto miners. Okay. This is not a complete list of crypto miners, but this is, I think, since the last halving. I mean, crypto miners are very levered to the price of Bitcoin. When the halving happened, their revenue got cut in half, and simultaneously, the difficulty level of mining Bitcoin shot up. So that requires an investment on their part to actually get newer rigs, greater efficiency, which means what? You're spending money. So your revenue gets cut, your spending goes up, and then there is that 6-month period of time where Bitcoin prices are not yet making new highs. So you got to survive that period. The companies that are there that have survived it, that were able to make new investments, to capture a greater market share, if you will, of the mining, of the Bitcoin mining market, those are going to lead. And miners as well will anticipate the peak sometime next year or early next year. The miners, as crazy as it may sound, will probably, at least in terms of our short-term trade, probably do better than Bitcoin and probably do better than MicroStrategy. Why? Because their leverage is huge. Remember, mining rigs are a fixed cost, and they don't go up with the price of Bitcoin. So as Bitcoin prices go up, let's say to 100, 200, 300, or 400,000, the money just flowing to the bottom line for the miners just starts to become a gusher. And people will bid those profits, and they will extrapolate them into the future. So the miners have underperformed relative to everything else, but I believe that if you take my thesis to be right, then in next year, 2024, 2025, 2025, the miners will be the best performing part of the crypto cycle, minus, of course, I don't know what's going to happen in the larger crypto market. I mean, will there be, a meme coin season, altcoin? Well, that's all to be seen. But that's what my view is of what is going to happen over the next sort of like 12-ish kind of months with Bitcoin, with crypto-related stocks. I mean, obviously things like Coinbase, Robinhood, even like related stocks that have anything to do with crypto will start to boom. PayPal, Block, those are the ones that come to mind. We got a lot of comments here, so we'll try and get to them. All right, let's see here. Nice dip in PayPal. Was hoping to get in. Thank you, David. Rashad. Always good to hear your take. Are you doing live next Tuesday, election day? Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to talk like politics. I mean, I don't want people like giving me crazy comments. So, I mean, I'll probably do like a completely non-political live stream, but yes, I'll probably do it. Yes. Kevin. Hey, Kevin. Good to see you again from Lakeland, Florida. Even DDD is coming around. Positive vibes all around. Yeah. I mean, we own a couple of 3D printing stocks, Materialize and slipping my mind now. In the gold tier, and those two stocks have been performing, and everything suggests that the bottom is in for the 3D printing stocks 13 years later after the original bull market, which can show you like some of these bear markets can last a long time, and these stocks can bid up to such high levels, and there's so much supply that will hit pretty much every time there's an attempted markup. But it does look like these have been cleaned out, and definitely, 3D Systems, Stratasys, Proto Labs. I mean, the survivors. I mean, so many 3D printing companies have gone bankrupt. There's been mergers. I mean, all the signs are there for bottom. What are the signs of a bottom? Well, obviously, cratered stock prices, lots of mergers and acquisitions at crappy prices that people would have never entertained, obviously at the peak, and bankruptcies. Yeah, those are sure signs of a bottom, and we've seen them in the 3D printing sector. Steve says, glad to see your podcast again. Hey, we've been here. I've been doing live streams for pretty much 2 years. So we've been here. And we've been on ATG Digital. ATG Digital just celebrated their 2-year anniversary. So we've survived for 2 years. We got like about 2,400 or so subscribers, and we're thrilled to serve them. Hey Liz, tears of happiness. Pick your. Liz, after. I mean, things peaked in 2021. I mean, we'll take some happiness, like all kinds of, and it's okay if we have tears of happiness as well. Liz, always appreciate your enthusiastic support. Thank you. Great to see you. Alex says, "Hey Paul, nice to see you again." Hey Alex. MSTR. Yes, MSTR is Microstrategy. Hang glider dude says, I picked up PayPal. They have some wild targeted advertising ideas. Just remember, I mean, most digital companies, very different than legacy incumbent old world companies. Effectively, all of these are very, very large computer, right? I mean, as the volume goes up, at some point, the costs are paid and pretty much everything drops down to the bottom line as cash. So you've got platforms, everything from obviously the original PayPal, Venmo. I forget what their foreign exchange thing is called. They have some accounting thing. It all sits on one big platform. So, I mean, as long as their cost of acquisition is fairly small and they run that volume through, it's all at some point going to be pure profit to PayPal. Yep, SDXS still in diamond tier portfolio. Just that they are waiting on a number of events that are going to unfold where they get approval for their new system, for their new catheter. Markets look ahead by 12 to 18 months. These look to be game changing, both for their for the medical sector in which they're in, obviously for the company. So should be good. GLW Corning. Is that the one you mean? I don't know what else might be. I am not interested in Corning. I mean, it just doesn't fit what we tend to focus on, which is opportunity, growth, and innovation. It could be good, but you have to kind of distill yourself down to what you're going to focus on. Jeff says, "Hey Paul, what's with Elon's role in the Trump administration? Sounds like it would be absolutely not. No, this is a non-starter. Absolutely not. There's no chance. I'll give you less than zero chance of Bitcoin being anything other than a store of value for the vast majority of human beings that have access to the US dollar. I mean, there are 3 roles for a currency. One is a unit of exchange, in other words, what you count in. One is a store of value, and third is the medium of exchange. And the medium of exchange is essentially a monopoly of the dollar, pretty much. Secondly, followed by the euro and the yen. In my opinion, zero chance of that. This is not like the reason to buy Bitcoin at all. As for Elon's, well, he said that what he would like to do is help create this, the Department of Government Efficiency. I think he's laid out that there could be, as we could save as much as $2 trillion of the budget that has been put out there. And then he would say he would like to go back to making cars and rockets. So that's my view. David says, Raul, Paul, Plan B, and Paul make the crypto folks I listen to. Thank you, sir. And we have a thanks, Paul. Steve says, can I see you without the chart? You see me here, right? Everyone can see me, right? Jimmy says, Pi cycle top. Yeah, I mean, there's any number of things that are out there. I have to say that you can know how, I guess, how credible a kind of system of analyzing Bitcoin is by how much hate they get at the bottom, and their unwillingness to yield to whatever people want you to agree to somewhere near the bottom. But I will look into that. Yeah, I don't know about this. I mean, some of these I think are coincident rather than predicting, because anything that doesn't start with the fundamental nature of Bitcoin, which is not a currency, it's ultimately a digital property, right? There's 21 million of these, at least, in big form. And then if you want to count it in Satoshis, then there's, far more of these. So yeah, that's driven, obviously, I mean, those are sort of like relatively minor factors, but a bigger factor is this. I mean, 21 million coins never changes. 50% cut never changes. What is the human response to that? I suppose there's fear and greed in that. So if you're a more short-term oriented person, I would say yes. Yeah, I mean, it is one of the miners that's out there. I think, there were like 20 or 30. It's like consolidated down into maybe 15 or 20. To the extent that they are still in the game at this point, and many miners have been knocked out because, once revenue got halved after the halving, once they had to, spending up to compete so that they can continue to, capture Bitcoin, they're going to be okay. Jimmy says, "Is report earnings?" Yeah, well, earnings have nothing to do with why MicroStrategy is rising. So I mean, people sometimes point to this as like, well, that's like a tiny piece of their market capitalization. And so if people are making like earnings events based on MicroStrategy, you have to question their understanding of like what they're doing. Really, I mean, I think this happened in the last quarter, and I said the same thing. I was like, that's event betting. When I was on Wall Street, I never was at one of these hedge funds, but one of my friends was. He's like, all we do is bet on earnings. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, so you start to accumulate a position depending on the size of the company 2 to 3 weeks earlier, going either short or going long, depending on your viewpoint. And then I'm like, well, how do you get out? He's like, well, we'll get out like the moment the earnings results come out. I'm like, even in the aftermarket, you guys will crush the stock just to get out. He goes, absolutely. If we find liquidity, we will take it. They don't care about the next day, the next week. I mean, this is not my game at all. There are some people who play this game, and if they want to play with MicroStrategy, that's silly. I mean, I think even though I don't play this game, I point them to far better stocks to play the earnings event game with. Rose says, can you provide insights on RCAT? We sold RCAT and RDW. It's not, that's not, Redwire. I think this is a satellite company, right? I mean, I don't know Redwire well enough to just talk offhand. I would have to look into it. My general view of satellite companies, I think somebody came on the live stream and asked me about ASTS. And I was like, yeah, nobody's competing with Starlink. I'm sorry. You have to, they're planning to put up tens of thousands of satellites. Yeah, I mean, the history of satellite companies prior to Starlink being successful is essentially like very, very, very low, because very high fixed cost ahead of time. So you got to like borrow money, raise money endlessly before you can put your satellites up. The cost of transportation used to be very high. Um, but now it's much lower with SpaceX. But the thing is that, well, I mean, SpaceX, I mean, has so many more satellites, and they're improving their satellites all the time. So it is going to be incredibly difficult for anybody to compete with Starlink and SpaceX, in my opinion. Um, hey, Paul, the crypto season is around the corner. The ride is going to be more exciting. It is definitely going to be up and down, up and down. I highly recommend people don't stare at your accounts, especially at the highs. And you can monitor your own behavior. If you're waking up in the middle of the night and staring at your Coinbase account all the time, well, you're somewhere near a high. I'll tell you that. And when you feel like, oh my God, I'm tired of this, I'm gonna stop. Well, it's somewhere near the low. That's been my experience through time. All right, AIRG. I've seen this show up somewhere. I need to put up my Y charts to be able to talk intelligently for whatever. I don't always know all these companies. I mean, let me log in here. IAR Systems. Yeah, let me share this. That's I don't really know anything about this company. This is a foreign stock, trades on the over-the-counter exchange. So I know one thing: it's a liquid. It's a micro cap company. Generally, I mean, it's in like tech of some kind, but I don't really know this. Anything's possible. I mean, it's up 26% over the last year. I mean, a lot of it has come very recently. One thing I know, I mean, just that generally when people bring stocks to me, it's because the stock has risen a lot recently. Very few people come to me and lay out, be like, Paul, this company's sales have gone up by 30% for the last 3 years. Their profit margins are rising. They have 3 new products. Nobody pitches me, with fundamentals. People always pitch based on stock price, which then immediately, if it's the stock that's gotten you in, you got to go back because ultimately the buyers are in for the business. We got a question on a sale here. Yeah, we sold OPTT. We got a question on this, I think last week or the 2 weeks before. So we have, I mean, in each ATG digital portfolio tier, we're trying to keep it to about 50 stocks. And we can clearly see, if I look at what's being bid up and what people want to own and that are backed by actual business, numbers that are analyzable. OPTT, just like in today's world, I wouldn't even at the current price, I wouldn't buy it again. So that was like one of the last few stocks that we really had lingering from Banyan Hill days in Diamond Tier. They seem to be making a pivot to these submersible drones and depending on defense, but that pivot obviously is not big enough. Now they're talking about the renewable energy again. They claim this backlog, but truth is, I've never seen companies just get bid up based on the backlog. You got to deliver sales growth. That's what growth investors want. That's what pretty much all investors want. And I just didn't see I think our money would be better served by taking the loss here, as big as it is, and I will track it. And if it looks like they are building a business where investors get interested in bidding up sales, where you can see that bid up process in the price to sales multiple, where people are like, hey, I have higher confidence on higher growth and I will pay 4 times sales, I'll pay 5 times sales, I'll pay 7 times sales. That is the way you make money. And without that regular ratcheting of those two things, you got to have the sales or the sales forecast sales guidance, whatever you want to call it, and actual delivering of results going up. And then people's confidence in that goes up. And then they bid higher. I just didn't see the chance or the likelihood that in the next 12, 24, 36 months. So I was like, well, let's clear this slot out and let's find something that can actually make us money in the next sort of like, 1 to 3 years. So that is the reason we sold out of OPTT. Oh, yeah, sorry, you're right. Let me try this again. Yeah, this is still a micro cap company in technology. Again, I don't know it. It's obviously up a lot. And I don't add it up 192% in 1 year. Here, I can quickly show you my way of checking sort of my expectations, right? Okay. So this is my little hack, if you will. I use so the green and the blue lines give you sort of like what, if there are any estimates out there of the company's revenue growth for the current year and then for next year. And then the purple line is the stock price, and the orange is the price to sales multiple. So I told you about that ratchet that happens, like how gains are produced in the market, which is that the revenue estimates go up and then the multiple that people pay for that keeps rising. So when you have very high confidence, you are willing to pay 7, 10, 12, 14, 15 times sales. Here with no estimates, I can't really tell. And since I don't know the company particularly well, I would have to go back and read the earnings release. Maybe they're guiding to something higher in an industry that is seeing general growth, but I don't have an opinion on this one. But that's my process generally for sort of like getting in very rapid time to a decision on any stock. You're welcome, sir. You're welcome, sir. And I think Moritz was the one to ask about OPTT. Maybe yes. One more. What is my thoughts on EXO? Here, let's put EXO up on that same thing. So EXO is a stock that makes exoskeletons. Let me change this to EXO. And they, I think, have a few more estimates here. You can see EXO had a big jump in revenue estimates for the current year. Then for next year, yeah, they're kind of like flat-ish. However, this is a company I know pretty well, and they have two things going for it. One is that they bought a well-developed technology and product from Parker Hannifin that they got for a very low price, I think about 18 months ago. So that's one big thing. Second, very recently, CMS, which is the part of the government that administers Medicare and Medicaid, gave a code for exoskeletons, which is almost guaranteed to increase the utility adoption of exoskeletons for folks that are in the Medicare program. So somewhere in the next 12 to 18 months, their revenue is going to go up. And with that, I believe you'll see significant gains in that stock. All right. An hour and 3 minutes. I think we have exhausted the questions that have come in. I want to thank you all for attending this live stream. Stay tuned because very clearly, like everything from crypto to our stocks, things are acting better. We're starting to see investors come in wanting to buy smaller stock, mid-sized stocks, OGI stocks, opportunity growth, innovation stocks. So if you are looking for what to buy, and general thoughts on all of these kinds of things, well, atgdigital.media. With that, I'm going to say thank you all, and see you next week. Bye.